Welcome to the Drop Strokes Golf Podcast. This is our maiden voyage here for episode 1. I'm going to be David Folk. This is going to be Mike Sells. And today we're going to start this podcast. And today we're going to be talking about how the pros practice versus how the amateurs practice. But first, we're going to talk a little bit about why we decided to start this podcast.
Are you always going to be David Folk? And I'm always going to be Mike Sells?
Maybe.
Okay.
That might be a good idea. So one of the reasons why I feel like we want to start this is just kind of two average everyday golfers. You know, we might be a little bit better than most, but just kind of talking about real world things, doing some different club geek speak type talking, as well as what the average Joe is going out there and playing golf, and giving some different tips, different ideas from the world news, just trying to help guys like us improve their game when they go out and play, a couple times a month versus, reading golf blogs and, golf.com articles and seeing all, kind of trying to emulate what pros are doing when we're not spending 10,000 hours becoming.
We have regular jobs.
Yeah, things like that. So, looking at today's topic, which we are talking about pros versus Joes, or pros versus amateurs, and how they hit 50 golf balls when they go to the range, to do their practice. What are they doing? What are pros doing versus what are we doing? Is there a right way, a wrong way? Right. And we're going to talk about that today. So Mike found this article on golf.com, and I'll put that in the comments below in the description so you guys can check that out as well.
Yeah, it basically just looked at how does an average amateur practice over 50 balls at the range versus how does a pro practice, and you can see how an amateur practices when you go to the range. Mm-hmm. It's whatever club they choose to warm up with, and then a half an hour of driver, and then forget to putt and a bunch of stuff. So just kind of giving some more meaning to practicing, because you can go to the range to have fun, but if you're going with intent to figure something out, to try and shoot a little bit better next time, there's a more structured or better way to do it. So basically they took 50 golf balls from a pro, 50 from an amateur. And if you look at the data on the article that David's going to link, it's essentially predominantly wedges. Second would be driver, and then just a couple. So there's 25 wedges, 12 drivers, 3 woods, 2 long irons, 4 mid irons, 4 short irons. Mm-hmm. And I know, like for me, before reading this, I would always warm up with an 8 iron. And I wouldn't stop warming up with that 8 iron until I was comfortably hitting my 150, 160 target, and then that was warm for me. And then I would get lured in by chicks dig the long ball and hit driver for a little bit, and I would know I need to try and hit wedges. So then I would hit a bunch of wedges. But there was no real structure to the way I was doing it. So I think if you sat down, or if you had someone follow you and kind of catalog how your actual round went, you would find the things you probably practiced the least are the places you probably drop, the most shots on and stuff. So, for me, I find when I'm playing better is when I spend more time pretty much almost not even hitting balls. I'll just take 5 or 10 balls on my own and just hit pitch shots around the green, putting some, maybe hit some drivers, but I think getting off the tee is very important, and I think when you're close to the green, getting it nearest or in the hole as soon as possible, and that in between, for me at least, when you're in the fairway, I just need to get it close. I don't need to worry about proximity of 5 feet to 6 feet to 8 feet, whatever.
Mm-hmm. So and that's going to be the question that we're going to discuss today is what the pros are doing. Is that something that we as non-pros, we as people who go out and play 20 times a year or 30 times a year, is that a good idea? Or do we look at the amateur stats, and we'll kind of talk about that for those who are just listening to the podcast here. The wedges are going to be 10 wedges. You have 10 short irons. You have the mid irons. They're going to be 12. Long irons are going to be 10. Fairways are going to be 8. And then the drivers are going to be 8. So
which I found surprising, because I go to the range and that's all I feel like I see people hitting is just drivers.
Yeah, the long, mid, and short irons I'm surprised with as well. For me personally, for guys who are not hitting a lot of shots or aren't going to the range or just going on the weekend warrior type of guys, you're playing 20 to 30. I gotta think that practicing everything more evenly is gonna give you a little bit more confidence in your overall game.
Yeah.
But I also question that.
Yeah, I just don't know how well that applies. Like when I have friends that I try and help locally or something like that, I say that like I think for me the most important thing for like a higher handicap, someone closer to 20, is like you have to have a trustable way to get off the tee. Mm-hmm. Like there's nothing that ruins a hole more than being 50 yards off the tee in trouble, and even if you're the shortest guy off the tee, if you can get 180, 200, 200 yards off the tee and be playable, that at least sets you up to finish the hole better than you started. So
yeah, and let's actually talk about two different options. Let's talk about practice on the range and then getting ready for a round of golf.
Right.
So I think that those are two different ways to practice. When I look at, but let's talk about practicing on the range first. When I go to practice on a range, especially if I haven't practiced in a while, I like to pick one club that I'm really feeling good with. Like for instance, yours is your 8 iron. Right. I like to pick like a 7 or a 6 iron, something that I know that is going to be long enough off the tee, exactly what you're talking about, but will also put me in a similar distance for being able to hit that next shot. Right. So if I hit a 6 iron, I know that those are two shots I can get close to the green or onto the green, right, depending upon what it goes. So when I haven't practiced for a while, especially when I go to the range, I usually pick 2 to 3 different clubs, and that's where I hit the vast majority of my balls here. Yeah. So I usually look, I do what we see here. I pick let's say a mid iron and a short iron, and then I pick a wedge. So for me, it's usually a 6, a 9, and a wedge. And yeah, those are the 3 things that I usually try and shoot for. And it's usually going to be my 60-degree wedge, just because that's the thing I need work on to make sure I can score and get close to where I'm shooting.
I think everybody needs a wedge that they trust for the majority of shots around the green. I haven't decided on what that's going to be for me. It depends on where I'm playing, but it's either a 56 or a 60. Mm-hmm. But for me, my must get off the tee club is either I have 2 driving irons. I have a 2 iron and a 4 iron. 4 iron I trust a little bit more than the 2 iron, mm-hmm, but the 2 iron I trust immeasurably more than. I don't even carry a fairway wood. Mm-hmm. I don't carry a 3-wood, a 5-wood.
Yeah, neither do I. Yeah.
Not a big hybrid guy because those tend to go really high for me and hook a little bit, but. For me, I think a lot of people, when they're practicing at the range versus when they're warming up for a round, I think the closer those 2 things can be together, the less difference is, because in the end, what you're trying to do is shoot better when you're playing. Mm-hmm. So if you got a bunch of different things going on while you're not playing, then it's less that you can take with you to the course.
So you say same for the practice and for when you warm up to get ready for a round?
Kind of. I mean, when I go to the range, I get 80 balls or 100 balls, whatever. I don't get the jumbo bucket. And then I think when I warm up, it's kind of a condensed version of that. The last couple shots I hit before I go is with the club I know I'm going to tee off on the first hole. Because if I get warm and I'm hitting driver, like our Quail, if we play at Quail here locally, it's not that long of a hole, but it's a dead left turn over water, and so you don't go for the green because you can't see it and there's trees, but you only need to get 180, 200 yards off the tee. Huh. So if I leave the range hitting driver, I don't know if my 7 or 6 iron or 8 iron for off the tee is dialed in. So I may be striping them on the range and then go shank one on the first tee, and then that just ruins the tone of the round for me. So I'll try and end my warm up session before, even if I even have time to warm up, but with the club I know I'm going to hit off the tee.
Interesting, because I always end mine with wedge shots. That way I feel confident with. Okay, I live myself this shot, and I'll hit like a 50-yard, a couple of 50-yarders, a couple of 80-yarders, and then I'll hit a couple of full 60-degree shots to give me the confidence.
That'll be part of my warm-up, but I always end with the tee club. But yeah, when I'm at the range, normally, if I'm behaving, it's a warm-up club for me of an 8 iron, and then when that's warm, I might hit a couple drivers or a couple 2 irons, and then I try and spend time on wedges and stuff, and then I think the problem I have too, where it's different from playing around, you hit a shot, it's 2 minutes till you hit your next shot. And when you're at the range, every 20 seconds you're hitting a shot, and so you hit 4 or 5 drivers, and then you go to hit an 8-iron,
Yep.
and you chunk the first one because you're just in this driver posture
Mode,
for
yep.
a couple minutes. So
Yep.
for me too, I think pacing yourself too.
It's going to be
So-
key. And as we talk about pacing, let's talk about real quick who our sponsor is for this podcast. Starting out, it's going to be the Back Nine Indoor Golf here in Boise, Idaho. And as the Christmas season comes around, obviously they have lots of gift cards. But every Friday night, gentlemen, every Friday night, I know that we all love golf because we're all listening to a podcast, and we're doing a podcast here. And we also perhaps love our significant other if we have one. And every Friday night here at the Back Nine, they have a couples deal. It's $50 for 2 hours of golf and 2 drinks. So if you guys are in the local area here, stop on by on Friday nights, and you can get that $50 special. Just be sure to mention this podcast. You can check out their email and sign up for the email list as well, and we'll get you squared away and enjoy playing the game you love, spending time with the person you love. So back to going with the practice range versus the on before the round range.
Yeah. I don't think a lot of people actually warm up as much as they should. I mean, I consider myself a serious golfer, and I probably hit balls before the round 5% of the time. I mean, we all have families, we have kids, we're rushing to make a tee time. I'm fortunate enough to have my wife allow me the 4 hours it takes to play to ask for another hour to warm up.
Exactly,
or
exactly. And I think it goes back to what you were saying, especially with taking the time in between the shots. I think that is crucial to the success of the round and to the success of the practice, to constantly do that pre-shot routine, which we'll probably talk about in another podcast and what that might look like or not look like. But having whatever your pre-shot routine is, being able to get up to the ball, have the confidence. Usually when I do that practice, specifically when I'm doing it before a round, but even on the range, if I'm really trying to make improvements and whatnot, I try to think about what shot I'm hitting and what hole that might be on. So for instance, if we're playing, let's say Lakeview here locally, let's say hole number 2, I'm going to pull out my driver. I'm going to practice a cut, trying to hit it around that big evergreen tree to try and get that around there so I can put it in the fairway about 100 to 120 yards out. That just gives me a nice little shot into the green, which then I can obviously use my wedge that I've been practicing and working toward. So it's just visualizing what shot you want to hit, and then doing that and executing that, and then all of a sudden you can go do that on the course because you ended up doing it on the range.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of philosophies of how an amateur should practice, but I think that one of them is 100% must-have is you got to practice with a purpose. Doesn't make any sense to just blindly hit clubs if you can't consciously, like I like to think, even if you're not going to follow the pros' breakdown of how they spend their 50 balls, when you're hitting that mid-iron, think of your local club where you're 180 yards out and you have trouble hitting the green or whatever. Like, visualize that. A wedge shot or driver shot. I like to, like what David did, I'll think of holes that I like to play, and I'll visualize those, and I'll play those holes out. I'm like, this one is normally a driver 8-iron for me, or it's a 4-iron, 6-iron for me, whatever, and I'll play that out and pick my targets and then practice that way. But yeah, however you divvy up your allotment of golf balls, I think having a purpose to it and spending some time thinking about the shot a little bit more than just mowing off 10 balls in a row. And that's not something, you're not going to go to the course and just start mowing balls. You're thinking about the shot and stuff. Even if you don't know the correct way to think through it, you're still giving it some thought. So.
Yeah, I absolutely think that's crucial for putting yourself in the right mindset, which really is what I think the range is for, kind of like we've been talking about. I look at the sheet, again, it's going to be right in front of us here, which is why we're kind of not looking at the camera. But just seeing the disparity, how even the amateurs are versus how grossly different the pros are. It's surprising as I looked at the article.
Well, the more I think about it, I'm not sure if you would follow exactly the pros' mentality. I mean, the pros can strike a ball with a broomstick. Like, they can hit all their clubs really well. So, whereas, like, it shows 10, 12 shots in mid and long irons, and mostly that's because people struggle with that tremendously on the amateur side. So they're just trying to flush 2 of them to feel good about themselves. And the pros, they understand that I can hit that good, and my expectation from 220 yards out is I'm going to be putting somewhere. So they're not worried about shrinking, 5 feet of that circle.
Yeah.
So that's why they want to be in a really good position off the tee, and so that's why they're working on drivers.
Yeah.
And when they're not on the green, that's where their wedges have to be dialed in. They make up their strokes on sticking wedges and stuff.
Right.
Whereas an amateur, they have a lot less trust in most of their bag, and so that's probably why it's spread out more. But
Yeah, and I do look at that, how spread out it is. I would highly recommend wedges, especially chipping around the green.
Right.
Tell me what you think about this?
I think.
Hold on. Tell me what you think about this question I'm going to pose to you, which has to do with practicing or potentially not practicing. If you have a half hour of time before a round, would you go grab a small bucket, or would you head to the putting green?
If I had a half an hour, can I have 40 minutes?
Nope.
If I had a half an hour, I would want at least 10, 15 golf balls. There's nothing worse for me than feeling stiff on the first tee. I don't feel like I can just walk up and swing, and that's so.
Interesting.
I want to be loose, period.
I feel like you do that all the time.
Well,
It's
feeling versus application. In an ideal world, if I had 30 minutes, I want 10, 15 balls, and I want to hit some mid-iron, like 8-iron or whatever. Hit a couple 4-irons, and then I want to know how the greens are rolling. So hopefully they've cut their practice green similar to the course,
yeah.
but
we know it doesn't happen all the time.
I mean, and that's come from playing with people at or slightly above, kind of around my skill level. Seeing it's a lot easier to notice someone else's weaknesses on the course than to pay attention to what yours are. And most of my friends, they never spend any time on the green, and so they get off the tee good, they get close to or on the green well, and they 3-jack everything, and then so.
And I think it's different when you're playing a course you're familiar with, a course that I work at a golf course part time, so it's one of those that, of course, I'm very familiar with. What the greens are doing, what kind of putting role it's
for me, like a new course, I care less about the greens than I do the layout, because I will, for me, any sort of I didn't know that was there, like really screws with my round. Like I thought I should have hit it there, or a blind shot, and then I can't find the ball. Like if I'm on a green, my green reading's decent enough, and after 1 or 2 holes, I think I've picked up the speed relatively good enough. But usually what breaks me at a new course is just the unknown layout and just knowing this is where I should have hit. And so,
interesting, because that to me is what I would, and it's not necessarily putting that I would spend a lot of time on, but I feel like if I'm playing a significant round that is important, like we're doing I'm playing in a tournament or playing some sort of family game or whatever.
Sure.
Like there's a whole bunch of people playing, and it's on the line or a scramble or something like that. My majority of my practice is spent chipping and doing different types of chipping around the green.
yeah, but
like that's trying to get it close, trying to work on what's going to happen, how's the ball going to react when I get here, how's the ball going to happen if I hit a flop shot that's going to be close, what happens if I'm going to hit a low bump and run.
Right.
That's where, if I have 30 minutes, that's where I'm going to spend my time.
And realistically, that's probably where I end up spending, because I can't go just buy 10 balls. So I got to buy a small bucket that's 50 balls, and then that eats up my entire half hour.
Yep.
So ideally, like maybe me and a buddy would split a small bucket and whatnot. But yeah, for me, if I can't get off the first tee, that will unfortunately set the tone for my round. Because that's kind of the story of my game. I have 13, 14 fantastic holes, and then 4 or 5 just doozies. I'll go shoot 85 and it's with 4 birdies and a bunch of doubles or something like that. And so I like to start the round off as best I can. And so for me, it's just being loose on the first tee.
It's interesting because I mean, we've played a bunch, and I see no issues with you walking up and just whacking
true.
4
Now we
iron
also
or 2
play.
hybrid or
When we play Lakewood, that's a fairly open first tee shot, and so.
Well, except there's water all the way down the right.
Yeah, but
and houses on the left.
But I'm a lefty, and my miss is a block, so I don't usually land in the water. But even like when I'll hit a good shot, it didn't feel right.
Sure.
Like I somehow accidentally got off the tee well, and
Yeah.
so it's just. I think more it's just it's a getting loose thing for me. It's a getting everything connected in the timing kind of thing, and if I can get closer than cold out of the car, then I'm kind of happy.
Then we're happy for sure.
Yeah.
No, yeah, it's practicing with a purpose, I think, is going to be the theme of what we're talking about today. Making sure, looking at the pros versus the amateurs. Obviously, the pros are dialing their wedges. They're looking at not only yardages, but also what's the wind doing. Where's the backstop? Right, they're playing in greens that
I don't think you can, like at our skill level, I don't think that sort of analytics helps me because I'm not consistent enough to be like, oh, the wind's really, because I could analyze the heck out of the shot and then pull it or hit it thin or
poorly
what.
execute. Right.
So I don't execute well enough that all of those factors, while they are a factor in how my shot's going to behave, my execution of the shot is 90% of where it's actually going to go. So
and I think that's something that we'll do a podcast pretty soon on for sure is course management, right?
Yeah.
What does that look like? Because that's going to be crucial to us as average Joes, as those who who just kind of play during the weekends, play 20, 30 rounds a year.
So what do you think about like an amateur? If they have their strengths, they have their weaknesses. Do they focus on both equally? Do you try and strengthen your weaknesses? Do you strengthen your strengths?
We're talking about just like the people we're talking about, right? 20 to 30 times a year playing.
Yeah, just your average guy.
Yep, I would definitely say strengthen the strengths. I don't see a reason.
Now,
really.
I placed this question outside of putting because you should never not practice putting.
Correct.
But
Short game, I feel like short game itself, you could be.
I think inside 20
really
yards,
good.
There's no reason. Inside, around the green, inside 30, 40, 50 yards, I think is a must practice.
To definitely drop strokes.
When I look at that chart, I see so many long irons and hybrids.
Yeah.
And just knowing what I see at the range of just not great ball striking with those clubs, do you practice that more? Because that's the other thing too. If you're practicing a poor swing, you're just ingraining the bad habits.
Yeah.
You're not. If you're trying to figure something out, just take a lesson. I mean.
Yeah. Well, and that definitely goes down the rabbit trail of. Is your poor swing actually a poor swing, or just does it not look pretty when you get it on a camera, right? Do you have an over-the-top swing, but it's so consistent that you can hit a 20-yard slice or a 20-yard fade, whatever you want to call it,
and
right?
Play it, right?
I think that if you can consistently do that and continually hone that, I mean, of course, there's going to be holes where you're going to be in trouble, right? You can't hit a 20-yard slice all the time,
Right.
But the vast majority of golf courses today, they're wide open. I mean, you look at what's happening on a PGA Tour with those courses. They're not shot makers courses. They're bombers.
Courses, yeah.
So of course.
I played with a guy when I lived in St. Louis. I used to play this cheap weekend course. It was $20 for 18 with a card. It was dead flat. There was like 4 trees and no sand on the course, so it was just straight back and forth. And I met a guy one time. We exchanged numbers, and we'd play probably once every other month. And he was 70 years old, played from the forward tees, and he aimed dead right and played this 20-yard banana slice. But he'd been playing that for 50 years.
Yep.
And that was his course, and that course was open enough to allow him to do it.
Yep.
And the guy never shot out of the mid-80s.
Yep.
It wasn't long, but he played everything, He
played his strength, right?
Right. Well, he knew how to play his weaknesses.
Yep.
So I think you have to decide it, but if your weaknesses are manageable, then I think you can overcome them with strengths. Like a poorly struck 4-iron is, I would take a better struck 8-iron and then hit an 8-iron again versus a 4-iron and you haven't practiced your wedges.
Yep.
And the 4-iron didn't really go any further than you could have hit your 8-iron.
Yep.
So
Because you're all hoping that 1 4-iron is
Right.
just gonna crush it.
right, and that's why I quit carrying woods. I'm like, if I hit a wood, I can crush it, but it's the return on the risk is not.
Yeah.
You know, I would get myself, if it wasn't that great, it would be fine. But like when I would miss, it was a lost ball, or it was topped, and I could have hit a wedge further. And so
Yeah.
and off the tee, you know, I don't hit the driver that bad, and I hit the 2-iron and the 4-iron really good. It didn't make sense for the one shot every 2 or 3 rounds that I might hit good.
Yeah, exactly. I'd rather have more wedges in my bag, which is what I traded them out for. I carry a driver and a 2-iron, and then I go to a 4 through pitch with a gap wedge, a sand wedge, and a lob wedge. So I
And
found
I'm just a club down. I didn't replace it with anything. I already had 4 wedges. I'm just a club down. I might even be, well, no, because I don't carry a 3-iron. But yeah, I don't. I'm club down, and it's fine. I've played when I was in college. Our coach used to make us pick 4 clubs and put them in a pencil bag, and we had to walk 36. And so I didn't find I played any worse, and sometimes even played better because I didn't have to. I had to, like,
you said the minimal.
I had a 5-iron, so I couldn't hit an 8-iron that long, and
Yeah.
a driver was too long for the shot. You know, so you had to get creative, and you had to manage that club, and so I don't mind playing with less clubs.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to practice as well, as we talk about, you know, between driving range practice and preparing before the round. I think 4 clubs, picking 4 and doing that, I think it's similar to what I'm looking at right here with the pros. You know, obviously they pick wedges and they pick the driver, and I mean, it looks like maybe 1 or 2 clubs that they shoot for.
Yeah.
You know, maybe just hit a couple here and there.
Yeah,
I think that's
I don't
very
think I would
wise.
disagree that might not be the best way for amateurs, but I would think where amateurs lack and where they fail is just more time on the short game and stuff. I spend more time I got a half hour to kill and I'll go chip and putt.
Yeah.
I might hit balls once a week, but I'm usually chipping and putting.
Yeah, I think that's
2 times a week.
I think that's really probably going to be the best place to spend the majority of your time if you really want to be interested in spending minimal time but improving your game the most is going to be that short wedge, the short putting, right? I mean, I can't tell you how many guys I saw, old guys who are out there playing at Lakeview, and it's, you know, they play on the forward tees, they hit 3 up, and then they get up and down. They end up shooting like an 85, and you're like, only because they understand their game and they understand chipping and putting is the magic, where the magic happens.
Yeah, and I think with the amateurs too, like you think about it, you spend 2.5 shots getting 400 yards away from where you started, and then you spend the same amount of shots getting 15 feet.
Yep.
You know, so.
Yep, absolutely. So, guys, let me know in the comments below. I look forward to hearing what you guys think. Looking at the golf.com article, sharing kind of what do you think versus pros versus amateurs, where do you think they should spend the most time if they had 50 balls, if they had a half hour. Look forward to hearing from you. From the back 9 here in Boise, we want to thank them for being such gracious hosts to us, being able to allow this podcast to happen. And we were just so gracious. Again, be sure to check them out, check out their website, and then join them for the couples night. Maybe Mike and I might come stop by on Friday night as well, if you guys hop out here. So I look forward to seeing you out here potentially. And until next time, guys, we hope you had a good time, and we look forward to helping you drop more strokes.
Yep.